The envelope was worn, edges softened by time, the flap unsealed. Marla found it wedged inside her rusting mailbox just past dawn. No return address, no stamp. Just her name written in blue ink, and inside, a faded coffee shop receipt, creased like it had been carried in a wallet for years. On the back, a message in careful handwriting. "We found you, and here's why." She stood on her porch for a long time, the winter wind brushing strands of gray hair from her face. Then the kettle inside began to whistle, and like most things in her life, the moment passed without noise. Back then, 5 winters ago, Marla worked the morning shift at Cliffside Brew, a squat brick cafe tucked near the bus depot. It smelled of old cinnamon and burnt toast. She arrived before the frost melted, turned on the lights, brewed the same dark roast, and laid out the pastries no one ever finished. No one remembered her name, but she remembered theirs, and how they took their coffee. Table number 3 sat by the front window. A soft chair, good light. An old man once sat there every morning at 7 sharp. He hadn't shown up in 2 years, but Marla still placed a tiny ceramic vase at his table each day. Sometimes with a daisy, sometimes just empty. One cold morning, before anyone else arrived, a man stepped in. Disheveled, out of breath, eyes hollow. He ordered coffee, then checked his pockets, flustered. "I forgot my wallet," he mumbled. Marla had already set the cup down. "Today I treat. You can come back tomorrow." And then, as always, she wiped table number 3 with her sleeve and straightened the little vase. The next morning came too quickly, and the air still smelled faintly of burnt toast and yesterday's rain. The bell above the door jingled constantly that morning. Rain tapped the windows, and steam fogged the glass, blurring the view of the parking lot. 2 waitresses had called in sick, and Marla moved alone between tables, pouring, cleaning, checking the register, offering polite smiles that no one really saw. At 9:15, a woman walked in, high heels, designer coat, thin lips, and sharper words. She barely looked at Marla when she ordered a caramel latte and settled into a booth with her phone. 10 minutes later, the voice cut across the hum of conversation. "I don't drink this," she snapped, standing now, holding the cup away like it was dirty. "It's cold. Who do you think I am?" Heads turned. The cafe grew quiet. A spoon stopped mid-stir. Marla stepped closer, unsure. I just set it down a few minutes ago. Maybe the draft—" The woman interrupted. "Excuses. Unbelievable." And then the manager appeared. Todd, young, clean-shaven, always tapping something on his phone. He didn't ask what happened, didn't look at the clock or the order log. He turned to Marla. "You need to focus more," he said, in the same tone he used to remind people to clock out on time. "If you can't keep up, I'll have to rearrange your shift." She opened her mouth but closed it again. The woman was watching. So were the other customers. A young man at the counter, the new hire, glanced over, then looked back at his phone. Something slipped from the woman's table. The ceramic cup shattered on the floor. "I'm sorry," Marla said softly, already crouching down with a towel. Her fingers trembled slightly as she picked up the larger shards. She stood slowly, rubbing her lower back with one hand. No one looked at her the way they did the woman, not even with pity, just like she wasn't there. And then she went to wipe down another table like nothing had happened. The morning passed in a blur. People left. The fog on the windows cleared. No one brought up the scene again. By late afternoon, her shift ended. Marla stepped outside. The rain hadn't stopped. It fell light and steady, threading her coat with dark lines. She slipped into her old car and turned the key. Nothing. She tried again. A low, tired groan. Then silence. The manager walked by, keys jangling in hand. He slowed just enough to glance. "Don't be late for your shift tomorrow," he said, then kept walking. She stayed quiet. Her hand settled on the wheel, not gripping, just resting, like the weight of the day had nowhere else to go. The windshield was freckled with rain. Outside, streetlights began to glow. Their yellow reflection danced in the shallow puddles, casting soft, broken halos. She didn't cry, didn't curse, didn't even sigh. Just watched the world blur quietly in front of her. Midweek mornings had a hush of their own, not empty, just softer. No rush, no fuss. Just the ceiling fan humming and the drip of fresh coffee finding its rhythm. Marla moved slowly behind the counter, restocking napkins, wiping glass, not expecting anything different, until she looked up and saw him. He was young, maybe 20. Rain clung to his jacket like a second skin, and his shoulders were curled inward as if trying to disappear. A phone pressed to his ear, his voice just audible through the glass.
"I know, but I can't go to that interview without gas money," he whispered, turning slightly away from the door. "I've got nothing left. I'm not asking for much, just, I don't know." Marla didn't think, she didn't ask. She poured a latte, added a touch of cinnamon, and reached for the receipt pad behind the counter. She wrote it out in her careful, looping script. $0, paid by staff. She stepped outside, the bell above the door giving a soft jingle behind her. The young man turned, startled. He opened his mouth, about to speak. She held out the cup. "Come inside. It'll warm your hands first." He stared at the coffee, then back at her. I can't accept this." Marla smiled. "Someone helped me once. Now it's my turn." She left him standing there, the cup still warm in his hands. Inside, the cafe didn't pause, and neither did she, as if nothing had just happened. The young man eventually stepped inside, sat by the heater, held the cup in both hands, like it was the first warmth he'd felt in days. No one else noticed. No one asked. And Marla didn't tell. Later, when the sky outside had lightened and the rain had thinned to a mist, she moved through the cafe like she always did. A customer waved goodbye. Someone asked for a refill. The clock ticked past 10. Then, without fanfare, Marla returned to table number 3. The old man who used to sit there had been gone for 2 years now, but she still treated the table like he'd just stepped out for a moment. She smoothed the cloth, wiped the surface twice, then pulled the small vase from the shelf and placed it gently in the center. No flower today, just the vase. A habit no one noticed, but to Marla it was a kind of hello. She stood for a moment looking at the empty chair, then turned, picked up her rag, and moved to the next table. Outside, the young man had gone, but his cup, still warm, sat empty on the window ledge. The heater kicked on with a low groan, rattling the vents in the corners of the living room. Marla sat near the window, wrapped in an old cardigan, her knees folded under a fleece blanket. Outside, the trees were bare now. She hadn't been to work in months. Doctor's orders. The joint in her right knee had given out at last, after years of standing. She survived on small government checks and coupons, enough to get by, but only just. The house was quiet most days, the kind of quiet that makes clocks sound louder. That morning the knock was soft, barely a tap. She hobbled to the door and opened it, but no one was there. The porch was empty, except for the wind nudging leaves across the steps. She turned to go back inside, but something caught her eye. The mailbox's door was slightly ajar. Inside sat a yellow envelope, aged at the corners, sealed but unmarked. No name, no return address. She opened it carefully with her thumb. Inside was a single piece of paper, an old receipt, yellowed and soft from time. At the top, Cliffside Brew. Something stirred in her chest. She'd written hundreds like it, but this one felt familiar. Her eyes narrowed. There, in faded ink, was the order. Latte. Paid by staff. $0. And beneath it, a handwritten line. Thank you. Below that, in a different handwriting, neater, deliberate, was another line in blue ink. We found you, and here's why. Marla stood frozen for a long moment, her hand still inside the envelope. Behind the receipt was another document, new paper, clean and crisp. It was an interview invitation from a nonprofit group based 2 towns over,
a national foundation that helped the homeless find jobs, housing, second chances. Attached was a job offer. Outreach coordinator, starting salary listed, benefits, flexible hours. Her name was typed neatly at the top. Marla blinked, sat down slowly on the edge of the sofa, reading the letter again. Then again, she hadn't applied, not for anything. She hadn't even left the house except for groceries. The receipt rested in her lap. She turned it over once, then again, fingers brushing the soft crease down the middle. She could still see her own handwriting on the total line, barely legible now. A breeze moved through the window cracks, and somewhere in the back of her mind, a voice echoed, faint, like memory. "We found you, and here's why." She stood up again, slower this time, the envelope still clutched in her hand, walked to the kitchen, opened the drawer where she kept birthday cards and recipes. She slid the receipt in among them, between layers of faded moments. Then she looked out the window. A black car was parked across the street, engine running. Tinted windows. She couldn't see the driver. Before it pulled away, something flickered behind the tinted glass. Maybe a movement. Maybe nothing at all. The paper was folded once, carefully, like something sacred. Inside, the handwriting curved gently across the page. 5 years ago, I was a disappointed child in the rain. A small, unsigned bill became proof of the kindness I needed in my darkest moment. I kept it throughout my years studying sociology. When I was invited to join the founding council of this center, I knew, I need you. The world needs people like you. Marla's eyes stayed on the page long after she'd finished. Her fingers trembled, not from shock, but from the quiet weight of knowing something small had lasted, had mattered. She stepped out onto the porch, envelope still in hand. The morning sun was just beginning to rise, casting long gold stripes across the sidewalk. She held the old receipt up to the light, ran her thumb along its faded edge, as if touching a message, or maybe the hand of someone who once needed her, and now no longer did. As the wind stirred the porch railings, a thought drifted through her. Maybe it was never about the coffee. Maybe it was about being seen, and if you've ever watched kindness ripple quietly through someone's life, then perhaps your own faith is already blooming somewhere.